everybody, it's Susan Lindner. I'm your host of the Innovation Storyteller Show, and we are talking about something we never talk about on this show today, which is real estate. Certainly, coronavirus has upended how we think about going to the office, where we live, cities or country, or maybe even as a digital nomad. And yet the desire to invest in real estate has never been greater. So I'm really excited to have on the show today a new startup that's been around for about a year and a half that's doing something that I think is really unique in the space. So I wanted to share it with you. Welcome with me today, Trevor Bacon, who is the CEO and co-founder of Parcl, a blockchain-based platform that allows users to invest in a digital square foot of physical real estate in neighborhoods around the world. So Trevor has a lot of experience as a portfolio manager at several hedge funds and has been focused on the tech sector, specifically software, payments, where he was introduced to blockchain about 5 years ago now, and the internet at places like Force Hill Capital Management, Millennium, Hutchin Hill Capital, and Barclays. So we're going to talk about all things real estate today and the breakthrough innovations that are happening in the space. So thank you so much, Trevor, for joining me. Welcome.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. Excited to be here. I appreciate you having us on.
Yeah, so a lot has been happening in the world of real estate. We've all watched it happen. I think some of us from the sidelines and some of us have been really very involved in moving all around the world during this time. So how did you get into this space, Trevor?
Yeah, so you touched on my background briefly. So I was always involved in the tech sector from an investment perspective for the last, before starting Parcl, for about 10 years. I was in investment banking and then also investing in tech equities, stocks, focused on payments, internet, software. So I'd always been around kind of forward innovation, mainly in the software sector. We saw how SaaS disrupted traditional software and older industries. So blockchain came around about 5 years ago, and I was pretty close with the evolution of and just following along. And so during COVID, we saw a lot of real estate volatility. So because you could work from anywhere, people were moving, as you alluded to places that maybe have tax advantages or better weather, schools. You just weren't tethered to where you lived. And what that created was just unprecedented price moves in areas like Miami or Phoenix, and even New York, more to the negative. And so what we started to think through was how we could capture these movements without actually owning the real estate, to basically create an investment to allow people to participate in these movements without actually having to move. And so that was kind of the genesis of it. And over the last year and a half, we've just seen more and more the drumbeat in the media, which is mainly true, around institutional buyers creating basically pricing entry-level buyers out because they're buying homes in record amounts. You see a supply shortage in housing overall, which is creating housing inflation. So those two things are a big factor in housing inflation, and then the interest rate volatility is creating more real estate volatility, because we haven't seen a rate hike like this in the last 40 or 50 years. So we think we're coming into the market at a really great time, both from a macro and micro perspective.
Yeah, how is that impacting the real estate market when you see interest rates traveling up so high in the government's attempt to mitigate inflation?
Generally speaking, we've seen so we have live price feeds. So how we've created our product is we are not touching the physical real estate. We have created price indexes, and that links to the blockchain to allow people to express a view on the underlying markets that we offer for trading. And so we do have live price trackers. You can look at Parcl Labs on Twitter, Parcl at Twitter. And so we every day we publish what the markets are doing. So we have seen it's not actually so dissimilar from kind of markets because general equity markets and global markets have been reacting negatively to rising interest rates naturally. Higher rates means
Less borrowing, right?
less borrowing and just it's deflationary on asset prices. So real estate has followed that trend and then has rebounded a bit of late. But yeah, so it's kind of as you would expect, just maybe to a lesser degree because the market is a little lagged and there is a structural supply shortage. So it's kind of keeping prices elevated.
So tell us how it works. How does Parcl work if I'm, coming to the website for the first time and I want to make an investment? Tell us how it works.
And so we've created indexes that, or price feeds, we actually refer to them as. So price feeds for the price per square foot in any given neighborhood or city. So we've started with Miami, Los Angeles, Manhattan, Brooklyn, Phoenix, and San Francisco. And so we have a tracker for or a price feed for these cities, and that which move based on the underlying transactions in the cities or neighborhoods. So we're tracking live going rate for any of these cities or in the future neighborhoods or international cities. So that links to the blockchain, and that's kind of your price, your unit price that you would use as a reference to trade. So if Susan, you wanted to go long Miami and it was $550 a square foot, if you think that's going up, you would just you'd have your wallet, your crypto wallet connected, and then you would just swap the US dollar coin or USDC into Miami, and then you would have a representative square foot of Miami that you now own.
And what was the choice to use the blockchain, use crypto, as opposed to, creating a straight trading index for this using dollars?
Yeah, there are several advantages to blockchain. One, it's much more scalable from a capital formation perspective. So we're in a space called DeFi or decentralized finance. And what that means is that it's a permissionless protocol. And what permissionless means is that anyone can pretty much access it, barring geographical restrictions. And they could actually provide liquidity in the system, whereas a centralized system would require us to have the capital reserves and the capital to actually facilitate the transaction. So it allows a broader set of people to actually participate in the market.
And where are you finding the greatest activity now?
So we launched about a little under a month ago to a small subset of users in what we call the closed alpha. Brooklyn has been one of the main attractions thus far. I think that for several reasons. I think it's kind of like a hotspot, especially for crypto people. Like Brooklyn is very well known to crypto folks traffic there. And it's just a general, and then it's just generally been a trending neighborhood for quite some time. So Brooklyn, Miami, Phoenix have been amongst the top. I think because of the general interest and activity in those markets in general.
And so is your intention, how do you see this kind of playing out, Trevor? What will it look like when, the top 10 cities in the United States are on this platform?
Yeah, ideally, how we envision it is that you would have taking a step back, we think that there are a few macro trends here that we play to. One, again, I mentioned earlier that institutions continue to buy houses, and then what that means is they'll probably rent them out, and you're kind of against the price of housing, or you're short, in other terms. because if the price goes up, you pay more rent. So you don't want you don't want the house price to go up. So there's a bunch of factors here that where we see this being your global real estate portfolio. If you're a renter, you can get exposure to your not your physical house, but your neighborhood, right? If you're in Brooklyn and you don't want to own a house, you can put some money down so you're not completely missing the movement in Brooklyn. And potentially you're a forever renter, you're a nomad, you don't know where you want to live, but you're saving up to buy a house in Brooklyn or an apartment in Brooklyn. This allows you to do that. So, for us, it's about flexibility, diversification. So you could have real estate exposure across the country and the world. You can own various, like, again, we call square feet parcels. So you can have 2,000 parcels made up of the whole world, and you have exposure to the global real estate market instead of one specific house. And then over time, we'll add other features such as shorts or leverage, and other kind of trading instruments that create a robust financial market, much like we see in traditional markets.
So, the precursor to this kind of investing was in a REIT, right? A real estate investment trust. Do you think of this as like that next iteration of the REIT?
Yeah, it's not in theory, yes, but REITs have become twofold, right? So one, it's like the biggest REITs are actually types of investments. So they're either data center or colo places like Equinix or even like the tower companies, I think at this point. So if you're kind of or logistics centers or hospital centers or senior living, like they're types of investments. They're not really about the location underneath, right? And so you can get that exposure, and that gives you that type of exposure and a certain type of dividend profile, which is great. And then on the other hand, you have the general market forces that, they're publicly traded, and often, stocks, all stocks for that matter, don't quite follow fundamentals most of the time, because they're mostly tied to, by and large, on a given day, like it's more of a macro game at this point, right? Than a idiosyncratic stock play. So like maybe, the world is getting anxious and REITs play a defensive role in a portfolio for stocks versus like the actual underlying movements of the market, like the real estate markets that underpin the investments of the actual REIT. So we think they're, they serve their purpose in various areas, but they don't really give you the exposure that you're looking for from a location perspective.
And do you think like Parcl comes along at a time when we're really re-envisioning what home ownership is all about? Do you think this is part of how millennials and Gen Z begin to think about their lives as not necessarily tied to, one employer, one house, one picket fence, 2.5 children? Like,
Yeah.
what do you think of the social underpinning around this movement, Trevor?
Yeah, exactly. I think you nailed it. I think we are all kind of re-envisioning what the American dream looks like. I kind of always go back to, why is home ownership so attractive in the first place? You put most of your money down, then you spend a lot on taxes and maintenance. I do think having exposure to, kind of a non-correlated, inflation hedged, non-volatile asset is important within any given portfolio. And so we want to provide a platform in which you can start to build. If your dream is to own real estate or a house, you can build towards that from a very early age, and not miss out on the movement of the underlying city or neighborhood that you would like to live in. And at the same time, you don't have to, if you choose that you want to spend your money in a different way, you can do that. So you're not like locked in to your real estate investment. If you're viewing it as an investment, you can buy and sell as you please, just like you would any other market. So I think you're spot on, Susan, with respect to, we're coming into an age that technology has allowed us, the internet has allowed us to have flexibility to be more flexible with respect to where we live, where we work, how we work, and investments should follow that that construct. And I think over time, people will want that freedom to their assets and their money to be allowed to trade them how they please.
Mm. And, there's, questions related to not just the blockchain, but crypto in general. Do you find that the fluctuations in the crypto market also impact the way that you structure the company as well as the business model?
For us, we're not, because we're at the moment tied largely to our price feeds and US dollar coin or USDC. We're really kind of avoiding from a lot of the market movements, right? If it's kind of, we're trying to peg it to the underlying as much as we can. If we start to layer in different types of collateral in the system, basically you could trade Ethereum for Miami, it starts to become a little more volatile because you're making two bets. I mean, our bet is I think it's a safe bet that dollar stays at 1, and then you're really just having exposure to the real estate market. So I think generally speaking, the way that I view it, it's more the volatility, and it's kind of more of a deterrent for new users in the ecosystem, right? I think that's really the main thing versus the underlying product. It's kind of, how do we invite new users in without being intimidated or scared of the volatility? I think part of that is macro, part of that's on us to basically educate and provide a comfortable experience for people to feel safe and secure. But I think our product comes along at a really great time, both from a macro perspective with all the kind of the nuances of what's going on in the real estate market, as well as I think in the crypto side for the next wave of users. I think we need more applications that are a little more stable, a little more secure, to bring people into the system and feel comfortable actually putting real money into the system.
Yeah. So what's the dream, Trevor? Like, how do you see Parcl unfolding?
Yeah, so we're hard at work every day to bring real estate to everyone. I mean, that's our mission, is to deliver real estate to everyone. We continue to innovate on that mission, first with our small subset of alpha users, and then getting into more users here shortly next month. And then we'll expand globally with respect to bringing new cities into the market. And I think Parcl should be in every crypto wallet in 3 to 5 years. It's a way to diversify your portfolio. It's an investment that's known. Real estate is an investment that's known to be amongst the best investment. And even I think it was last year, real estate from a volatility perspective. So, as investment managers often measure against risk, like your return versus the risk you took. So your return divided by the volatility of the asset equals your Sharpe ratio. And real estate was like a 3 Sharpe ratio last year, which is like, it was the best performing asset, because when you measure how much risk you take to get your return. So, we think that because of that, we want to bring that to the masses, and this is the best way to do it right now.
Hmm. And, certainly starting any startup does not come without its challenges. What did you find initially when you were pitching the VCs and trying to get folks on board with this concept? What kind of pushback did you get?
Yeah, it ranges. So I think you kind of, looking back, and one day I'll have even much greater perspective when, but, I think it's really kind of the motto of just keep going, keep executing. At first it's just an idea, then you need to get co-founders. And then once you get the co-founders, you need a team. And how do you get the team? You need to pitch the investors on the idea. So there's always like there, especially at the beginning, like a mega chicken and the egg because all the questions from the VCs are like, how are you going to get a team? What, what about like, there's a million questions that at the very start, it was kind of like team based. And so it was important for us to get a couple really great investment partners to believe in us and our vision. And that helped us form the team, because, you're trying, especially when we started, yeah, like it was the hottest talent market in maybe ever, especially in tech, because of the digital transformation, the digital transformation trend that was going on. It was just a really tough developer environment. And so having early backers really helped us attract talent. And then, the problems, just not the problems, or we try not to frame them like that, but basically the opportunities slash challenges, they kind of morph all the time. It's getting the team, it's retaining the team, it's technical challenges, it's customer acquisition, regulatory, that now it's like, oh, the crypto market. So, that is something that's a constant. Like, change is going to be the constant, challenge is going to be the constant. It's kind of, how do we navigate that with our mental and grit, and kind of just keep going, and make the best decisions we have with the best information possible at the time, and then having the confidence to do that, and then just persevering through any kind of headwinds that we may have, knowing that we'll prevail on the other side.
And what do you think is what will be the next big milestone for Parcl to know that it's really working and you're on track with this idea?
Yeah, so we are really thrilled with our initial rollout to our user, like our user base. And we'll have another kind of beta user experience here probably within a month or so. And we expect that momentum to continue. We also, on the data side, will be releasing an API for all the data that we've amassed, and we have a kind of another go-to-market strategy on that. And we have early pilot customers, coming on board for that too. So there's a lot of great stuff in the pipeline. We continue to focus on being focused and execution. But we're really excited for the next month or so, month to 2 months here, as we roll out both our mainnet beta, and then also the API for our data, which underpins the blockchain.
I'm kind of fascinated by just the platform itself, the price feed, because it would seem like, let's say I'm a pending retiree and I really want to know what, how home values are like in Costa Rica, right? If I'm moving to San Jose, over time, I might be able to track, what a parcel costs over a year, and I can do that from the comfort of my home in New York, as I contemplate comparing Phoenix to San Jose to LA, right? Or Miami as potential retiring spots.
Exactly. Yeah. So we will have price feeds for every basically the whole country. And you can think of them as, neighborhoods and cities are like arbitrary boundaries, right? They're just groups of latitudes and longitudes. And because we have the latitude and longitude of the entire country's home system, or all the homes in the country, you can have any grouping you would want. So you could have a neighborhood, a city, a state over time as a price feed, and it updates every day. And hopefully in the future, it potentially will update sooner, but obviously real estate transactions happen, throughout the day, and that's really what moves prices in the long run. So yeah, we want to have those available and accessible for analysis, for decisions, for people to plug into, and we think they could really start to underpin real estate and geospatial analytics as a platform, kind of in a broad sense. That's kind of our vision for Parcl Labs.
Yeah. And so, like any good startup, right? There's always the thought of growing, there's the thought of acquisition, there's the thought of IPO. Where do you see the future of the business going?
Yeah, honestly, like we try to not focus too much. Like, we have a lot, like we've bitten off a pretty meaty idea here. We've had
Yeah,
to
you
create
did.
our own. At first it was like, we had to create our own price fees, and now, we've been gratefully, really executed well overall, and stayed focused. So, we have our kind of immediate term goals, and I think coming to market, we'll have more feedback and what to iterate on, kind of throughout 3Q and 4Q, to make a better product, to get to customers faster and with more value. So, I think really that's what we're focused on at the moment.
Yeah, I've certainly seen, during this time period where you can invest in a physical space. Like we just opened a new, you know, warehouses in, in Akron, Ohio. If you want to get in on investing in warehouses in Akron, Ohio, reach out now. Or, there are companies that have structured portfolios around physical spaces that you can actually
Yeah.
buy pieces of. So do you think, like, is it hard for your initial investors and also your alpha users to get their brain around investing in digital real estate? Do people feel like they're investing in the metaverse and like, I have an imaginary home between Snoop Dogg and Martha Stewart? Like that's what it feels like? Or what do you
Yeah.
think?
Yeah, we'd expect some, I think there's a large education curve that needs to take place, right? I think, the kind of one generation is probably more native here, and one needs more explanation. But I think if you think of it like a derivative, or any other kind of futures contract, like you could, it's going to be a cold year in Florida. You want to buy orange juice futures, like you're never going to touch the orange juice, right? You're going to sell it at a gain potentially if it's a really cold winter. So it's much like that, right? It's like you physically don't touch any stock you own, any contract you trade. So it's much more akin to that. But that doesn't discredit those, kind of, I guess you would call it like fractionalized or crowdfunded opportunities. The thing about those models is it requires capital up front, and then time to close, right? So, and then you have lockups. So I would imagine that that warehouse, like you wouldn't be able to sell your shares for probably, I mean, the main ones are probably like a 3-month redemption. So, there's not true liquidity in that scheme. And so they're kind of different. I would say they're a little bit different in that sense. And they also, because you need the time and capital, you need you have limited supply, right? Like the company buying the warehouse, like, they have one warehouse right now. And then in order to offer a new warehouse, they need to secure a new warehouse and sell shares of that equity or opportunity, which again takes time. So I would view them as a little bit different. Obviously, there's benefits to both, right? I'm sure cash flow and tax benefits are amongst the top of mind for people wanting to own physical property. But at the same time, you have certain capital requirements, meaning you need to put up a certain amount of money and you don't have liquidity. So like you're always balanced, like there's no free lunch. So that's kind of where we're positioned. And in the future, we want to have leverage, which will help kind of more sophisticated investors wrap their mind around the returns, because real estate is levered returns at the end of the day.
For sure. Well, this has just been a fascinating conversation. I feel like we're giving my listeners a little bit of an insight into where the future of this space is. And so you don't have to get an avatar and try to hang out with your new Lambo, like cruising down the
No.
streets of the metaverse, right? You can
Yeah.
actually invest in digital real estate that is something that we can very much track, right? With even in the complexities of the market, you can see the values every day coming in and determining exactly what is the value of property in Miami or Seattle or here in New York.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you some of the questions that I ask all of my guests on the show, which are, number one, if you, in your mind, what is the greatest innovation of all time?
The greatest innovation of all time. And it has to be like a man-made innovation.
Whatever you say, Trevor, this is your world.
Yeah, I guess electricity is probably the best innovation, for at least from what I can experience.
Yeah. Fantastic. And if you had the opportunity to join any innovation team in history, which team would you join?
Yeah, I think it's tough because I don't know what the innovation teams were back, kind of further back, and I think a lot of the innovation kind of came from an individual group. But I like what Elon Musk is doing, just generally, like pushing the limits. I think he's I think it's fair to say the greatest innovator of our time, because he's creating like he's really riding the edge of physical, these are very hard to do things that don't ride just technology curves. He has to get scale for physical goods and manufacturing, which is something that is challenging, but I like that mentality. Kind of, he can conquer anything. So I'm a big fan of Elon and what he's doing across
Yeah.
all the ventures.
We had a Tesla guest on the show, and that was a fantastic conversation about what innovation and innovation culture looks like at a place like
Yeah,
Tesla.
exactly.
And then the last question I'll ask is, what's something that hasn't been invented yet that you would love to see invented? Something that really pisses you off, like every time that you're dealing with this antiquated method of something you wish would be fixed, or something you just dream of, like, gosh, I wish I had X. I wish somebody would just invent this most amazing, incredible thing.
Yeah, it's funny because I do believe the frontier that we're not, like, we pretty much, at least in the US and consumer cultures, like, have what we need. But yet we're still either anxious or actually getting more anxious, which is interesting because our quality of life, technically speaking, is the best it's ever been. So, I really think the next frontier is something to do with understanding the human mind. And so I think a mapping of the mind would be something that would be probably the most beneficial for all humanity as a whole, as we kind of morph from, our prior ancestors into this technology age. And I do feel like the brain is like overstimulated in some senses, and we kind of know why, but we also don't. And so I do think the best innovation, or the greatest innovation, would be a true kind of mapping of the mind, so that we can understand how to be better and reach our potential in a way that we're all happy.
Fantastic. So the same way we map the human genome, understand DNA structures, the same way we
Yeah.
should understand the
Yeah, I
human.
mean, I know they're working on it, and I think they're close with like mice, but the compute power is just not there currently, and it's going to take. But compute power follows exponential curves, so we'll get there. But I think it's really important because we are kind of running into some mind experiments, like just the iPhone and social media. These are things that are kind of against like what our natural state is. Just being aware of everything that's going on all the time is just not something that we are really wired to do. So it'd be good to know like the impacts and kind of direct our behavior to again reach our potential.
It's fascinating. I often reflect on the fact that I think Mark Zuckerberg appears to me, at least, to be one of the least social human beings on the planet when he gives interviews and things like that. And yet he is the person who is responsible for designing our social interactions for the last 10, 15 years. And it's amazing that we're conforming to the Zuckerbergian philosophy
Yeah.
of social interaction, right? When this is a person, I think, who does not necessarily enjoy social interaction on the scale that many of us do.
Yeah. Yeah. I think like at its heart, it's not bad, like it's just how we use it. And I think that some of the kind of more chemical inducing behaviors that the dopamine or, creates that kind of either addiction or doom scrolling, there's just various things that we do on it that are unhealthy. So,
Right. And
I
designed
think,
that way, right? And designed with
yeah,
monetization
exactly.
and constant use and right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of making sure that I think the youth, because they're really the first generation that when I got, I'm kind of, I guess, a millennial, but, I had the before and after here, but now everyone who's born will be native there. So it's just protecting them. And, again, it's not natively bad. It's just kind of how do we use it?
Amen. Well, Trevor, thank you so much for joining me today on the Innovation Storyteller Show. And we'll include in the show notes ways to get in touch with you and for people to hop on to Parcl and see what's next for their city.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Bye, Susan.